Welcome to Entanglement Radio, transcendent talk for the conscious mind. Join us for inspiring conversations with visionaries in spiritual science, new thought, and conscious healing. Explore the potential and infinite possibilities of what it means to be human with some of the best guests in radio. At Entanglement Radio, it is all connected. Now, here is your host, Angela Levesque, on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Good day and welcome. You are listening to Entanglement Radio on OMTimes Radio. I am Angela Levesque. I'm coming to you live from the beautiful, albeit foggy, foothills of the Rocky Mountains here in Boise, Idaho. I have a great guest for you tonight, Dr. Elliott Maynard. Does humanity need a new operating system? We're going to be talking about the subject of his latest book, Brave New Mind, Living in a Future Science World. Coming up next week, we have Dr. Anders Nilsson, and we are talking about meditation and transformation from a scientist's point of view. And then following up the following week, we have Janine Wiest on the alchemy of healing. So great shows for you. If you haven't really checked out the OMTimes radio website, I suggest you do that. Have a look around, check out all the other amazing shows and hosts that we have there, and check out the mobile app or the mobile listening option there. You do not need an app. You can just click on it and hear it from any computer or iPhone, whatever it is, and it sounds beautiful. So thank you for everyone who was involved in making that happen. As I mentioned today, we are talking about the brave new mind. We are talking about reinventing science, what that looks like for our future world. As you know, many people feel that we're sort of standing on this precipice of expanded consciousness. And I know that if you are part of the OMTimes community, that might just seem like your daily life. But we also know there's a lot of people out there who maybe are not in the same place as we are. So, you know, as hopeful as I feel that we are kind of creating this bridge between science and spirituality, I also have seen a huge pushback from a lot of people who have almost in a way, and I don't know if I feel correct in saying this, have almost adopted science as their own religion. That if it can't be quantified, if we don't have data for it, if we can't put it in this tiny box and replicate it over and over again, then it's not truth. And I think that is in such direct contrast to many of the people out there who are kind of embracing spirituality, expanding their consciousness. And I think that we need to find a way to bring it together. And I think what we're going to be talking about today is a very good start. You know, my background is in complementary and alternative medicine. And when we look at alternative medicine, we see there's the foundations for healing, the very basis that we've built a lot of the healing philosophy on is different than our conventional paradigm. And I feel that we still have that within our science, within our conventional science paradigm. So we are going to discuss sort of alternative science today and see if we can not only prove our spiritual nature, but find a way to expand it exponentially with what Dr. Maynard calls future science technology. So let me introduce him. Elliott Maynard is a neo-Renaissance scientist and conceptual designer who walks his talk, lives his dream, and is driven to share this information with others of like mind. His background spans the field of global ecology, coral reef ecology, oceanography, and tropical rainforest biology. He earned a PhD in consciousness research and has served on the faculties of Adelphi University, Dowling College in New York. He is a certified professional consultant to management and has been active in the corporate world as founder, president, and technology director for several corporations. Dr. Maynard is founder and president of Arcos Celios Foundation in Sedona. In addition to his work as a futurist, lecturer, author, educator, and global ecologist, Elliot is an accomplished artist, sculptor, musician, underwater photographer, and documentary filmmaker. Wow. So with that, I feel very honored and blessed. Welcome Dr. Elliott Maynard to the program. Hello, Elliot. How are you doing?
Fine, Angela, and thank you so much for having me as a guest.
Well, I'm excited to have you on. I want to start because you have a very, very diverse background, and a lot of it is in ecology and biology, and a very strong academic background. And doesn't much of what you say in your book, Brave New Mind, challenge academia directly?
Absolutely. And since we're talking about doing things consciously, I think it's very important to highlight the difference between tapping into this master information field, what I call the quantum information field. Great leaders, great artists, great musicians of the past have done this. But now the difference is we can do it consciously. I have a feeling that those people were inspired, but they often attributed it to the very mysterious or religious experiences of the time. Now that we've legitimatized this kind of thing, psychic technology, if you will, the key is when we learn and work in interfacing with this quantum field, we need to be consciously doing so, consciously observing, consciously learning how to learn.
That's a really important point because I don't think our system really promotes that, this idea of learning how to learn. It's more like learn our way and just remember what we tell you.
Well, your introduction, you mentioned the education system and old paradigms. What this book lays out is a new paradigm, which, unlike the rigid boxes of the past, is evolvable. It can change. It can butt off new paradigms, and therefore it is timeless. It's quite simple, really, but because of the overlays we've had through our parental guidance and our religious and the school institutions, we're taught to deny things unless we can prove them to be statistically true. I tell folks to imagine a little switch in their mind, and instead of not believing anything we cannot prove to be true, that's the old way of thinking, we open ourselves to the possibilities that this quantum field exists. It's a living information field, and we can access it at any time. And then we begin to become conscious of this when we're operating this way more and more. And I can pretty much guarantee you that miracles will happen in your life in most unexpected ways.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the old paradigm because, you were talking about the quantum field, and I mean, there is a whole part of science that is based is it's quantum physics. So we know that this quantum field exists, but yet we still are kind of running off a more Newtonian view of the world. And why haven't we taken what they've understood in quantum physics and made it more applicable to our daily life?
Well, I think if you really stand back and look at the underlying reason, the reason is fear. Fear of change, fear of being moved from our little comfort zones in our little cubicles. And this is why I entitled the book Brave New Mind. And I created a new operating system which would hopefully eliminate the kill or be killed, the survival of the fittest, the endless cycle of wars and environmental destruction, and the great costs in human life. Instead, we need to move toward a more nurturing world that supports the intuitive senses, which were our survival, a great survival imperative in before the last 200 years when the Industrial Revolution really kicked in, and now we're in buried in electronic smog, so to speak.
So I want to get to that in a minute. I want to ask you, so that kind of kill or be killed mentality, this very structured, linear, logical world, do you think our science is a reflection of that? Or do you think that our world, our culture, the way we've set things up is because of the way that we set up science? Because you always, you hear people talk about that our human nature is, we can't deny our human nature, which is, sort of barbaric and savage and that dog eat dog sort of mentality. So do you think that our science is a product, or do you think it's sort of a cause of that?
Wow. Is the dog wagging the tail, or is the tail wagging the dog? Uh, it's hard to say that, but obviously our scientific establishment is a product of industrial age thinking in most cases. Now, the new scientists, the ones that are moving ahead, do not continue what is called research. Research, an average PhD or a master's degree, you already know the outcome of the experiment normally, and you pick the experiment so that it will have an outcome that you can work with. Now, in the real scientific world, we bring the art of creation back into science, the co-creation. This means search. This is search instead of rehashing, beating dead horses. We move into the future, and I'll give you one perfect example of an individual who has done this very recently, and that's Elon Musk with the Tesla cars and the SpaceX project.
Yes, he is doing fascinating things. I've been following him for quite some time now, and it's just he, like you said, he is just really bridging, taking so much innovation and creativity and bringing it into his technology. So when we get back from the break, I want to dive into some of the 25 master keys and that you have come up with for this kind of new paradigm, this new human operating system. And I'm curious to wonder, and I'll let you answer this after the break, where did you come up with these master keys? Because they are very well developed. And I wonder if it's like you said, coming from a more research kind of place and just bringing them out, or if they kind of came from a place within inside of you, using what you think we need more of, our intuitive, creative aspects. So we are talking here today with Dr. Elliott Maynard, the subject of his book, Brave New Mind, and you're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque right here on OMTimes Radio. We'll be right back.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
The Laying On of Hands Healing Radio Show is about treating the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. Join me, Charles Smith, as I share life balancing measures such as nutrition and spiritual practices to help you take charge of your own health and wellness every Thursday at 7 p.m. on OMTimes Radio.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
The truth is, you can't change the world if you're broke. I know, I tried. Isn't it time you turned your life's calling into a profitable, freedom-based business? I'm Michelle Barr. Join me every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern for Sacred Success.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
All right, we are back here, and you're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque. My guest today is Dr. Elliott Maynard, and we are talking about the subject of his book, Brave New Mind, Living in a Future Science World. Now, before the break, I said I wanted to dive into some of these 25 master keys that you've come up with that are kind of the foundations of this future science technology. And where did you come up with these master keys?
This is a result of years and years of study in discipline in various areas. I spent many years in graduate institutions, and essentially a lot of this was learned in spite of the system as well as with the system. I tried to combine the best of everything. And essentially, when I look back at this book, when I first saw it, when it was transformed by the person that does the format for the book, I really was a bit in disbelief that I had written this book. And I looked at it and I said, if anyone had assigned me to write this book, I would be sort of really, it would be a daunting task. But it got done, and it got done very nicely. And the information sources are all either experienced by myself directly or indirectly, or well researched, and allow people to research for themselves. There's no doubt that this book was inspired and derived from information in the quantum field, because I can't see how it would have happened any other way without that connection.
Well, and I like what you said earlier before the break about, musicians and artists and all of that. That inspiration is probably coming from that, or is coming from that quantum field, and yet they don't attribute it to that. So I think that there's just, all of the information you ever wanted to know exists there. I was wondering, though, with your background in oceanography and biology and ecology, what did nature have to teach you about this future science technology? What can we take from nature and expand on it?
Actually, embracing nature in whatever way you can is very critical to the human survival and balancing out of the energy fields, for the simple reason that we've been so intimately connected with our environment for millennia, and then only fairly recently, in the last 50 years, have we moved from being a person that lives in some village somewhere and travels occasionally to being able to access any piece of information anywhere in the world through the global internet. And this internet is going to have another layer put on it if our listeners are not aware. Elon Musk is creating a whole fleet of 700 satellites, and he will probably use advanced 3D printing technology, which is written about in the book, to put these satellites up, and we will have a whole new layer to the global information field, the global brain, which does, of course, interface and embrace this quantum information field.
So that's a really interesting thing. So I had a conversation a few weeks ago trying to get these people on my show, but we interfaced with our studio with Skype, and they said that they have increased their vibration to the point that they are too sensitive to be able to interface with a computer, and that they really feel that things are going to, like, we are going to back away from all of these electromagnetic fields and devices and all of that, that our technology is actually going to sort of, we're going to go back to a simpler way of life, to put it. But you are kind of really embracing technology. And do you think that that is really where we need to go?
Well, all I can tell you and share with you is that I have a very deep conviction. And the truth, when you get to a certain point in life, or through work experience and life experience, you know that the truth is the truth. And recognizing that truth is a very powerful thing. Now, I fully believe that any new technology is essentially a gift from above, a God-given gift. And therefore, we should be able to move into a new intelligence and learn, this is conscious learning, how to manage this new technology. Monsanto debacle is a perfect example. And in standing back and given a little time, I believe it will prove to be a blessing in disguise, because it warned us of the severe consequences, unintended consequences, if we're not doing our conventional scientific due diligent work intelligently. And therefore, all we need to do, if we don't like a Monsanto product, for instance, is not buy it. It's that simple. We have that one option, and it can change the world, because if millions of people start thinking this way, any corporation is going to look at its bottom line and change its ways.
So you don't feel that technology is going anywhere. You think that, because I mean, it's not that, in that conversation with those people, that's not a new concept that things are going to go back to a much, we're kind of going to reboot and go back to a much simpler way of life. That's not something at all that you would get on board with.
Oh, absolutely. Because this whole new concept, this master paradigm of future science technology, embraces technology, but realizing that since our technology has gotten to the point where we've been able to see particles, smaller and smaller particles, and realize finally that we're in a situation where the actual presence of an observer begins to influence the outcome of the experiment. And at that point, the barriers between hard science and consciousness science become very blurred and indefinite. So this is the breakthrough, in a sense. And so accepting that, we can take technology and make it better by adding the consciousness technology. The example of medical intuitives working with surgeons would be a perfect example, and I have witnessed this kind of thing in operation, actually.
Yes, let's talk a little bit about, you also, so I want to let my listeners know, because your book spans energy, technology, future medicine, the ecology, so many aspects of it. I want to talk a little about some of the more spiritual aspects in there. And you talk about this idea of psychic, what did you call it? Psychic cleansing, I believe. And is that something, as we become more aware of our own energy field and our interaction with this field of consciousness, is that something that's going to become critically important for us to really have that clear communication?
Absolutely, and it will facilitate much clearer communication and a management of our more primitive emotions, such as anger, because anger and frustration can be turned around, and they can be used to power, say, the creation of good art or music, or even put into business. There are ways to do this, and each time we do this, it transforms the basic level of that energy from being something very negative into a transformative, a possibility for transformation, for one small example.
Is there going to be a bigger role for people who are, psychics, intuitives, those types of people that have already been probably for a significant amount of time? Are they going to kind of help us usher us into this new place?
Much more than that. I fully believe, I have another deep conviction that has just risen up. And what I believe will happen is that we have reached the point where the old evolutionary pressures have been put kind of back, and now we have a whole set of very new evolutionary pressures, such as weather extremes, such as electronic smog everywhere in the world, such as radiation problem in Fukushima. And these problems can never be solved with just technology. And there is the possibility of using consciousness tech in combination with nuclear reactions, using things like remote viewing to observe the chemical and nuclear reactions that occur and give feedback to the highly technical people. And why would we want to do this? Because it can save us millions and billions of dollars, and it will also be far, far more efficient financially. And number three, the most important, it may be the only way we will ever get through to survive as a human race if we don't get onto these new conscious, as you call it, conscious creation imperatives.
So we have seen a quickening since, like you mentioned, the Industrial Revolution, and then as we've moved into the information age, everything has been speeding up. So as we have this conversation, how far away do you feel the future human is?
Can you repeat that question?
I certainly can. I was just saying that we have seen a quickening. We talked about the Industrial Revolution, and now it's the information age. And as we talk about some of these changes and the implementing of these 25 master keys, how far away do you think that is from our present moment?
Oh, we're right there right now. And this is talked about by many different consciousness researchers from their own viewpoints. It's called the ascension frequency. If you realize that the human body or any solid object is essentially a holographic frequency set, then we also realize it can be transformed and done so instantly. I give the analogy of a reel-to-reel tape deck, which you have to move forward or backwards, or a video cassette to go to any particular spot and get that information or that movie or cut. Now, if you look at a compact disc and liken that to the quantum information field, you can instantly go to any point on that field and the information will come down to you. Not always instantly, but very shortly, you will find a solution to almost any problem you can imagine. And when you get groups of people working together who are conscious of what's going on, we can all support each other and create a coherent consciousness. And coherent consciousness is wonderful because a relatively small proportion of people who have certain common ground they can exist on, regardless of their other differences, can change the world. And I talk about this, it's called invincible defense technology.
Well, I want to ask you a little bit more about invincible technology when we return here. And also I want to talk about otherworldly entities and how you see them fitting into our future paradigm, as well as the role of corporations in the future. So we will get to that and more with Elliott Maynard on OMTimes Radio. I'm Angela Levesque. We'll be right back.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
Have you bought into the idea that you have to work hard for your money, that business is hard? I will share some dynamic access consciousness tools to get you out of your own way so you can create a business that actually succeeds. Join me, Simone Millisers, on The Joy of Business at 4 p.m. Mondays Eastern.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hi, this is Sylvia Henderson, intuitive life coach and energy healer. Are you ready to elevate and rise way above your normal? Be sure to listen to my show, Intuitive Transformations, on OMTimes Radio, Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. Get the inspiration you need to transform your life.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
Welcome back, and you're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque right here on IOM.FM. My guest again today is Elliott Maynard, author of Brave New Mind, Living in a Future Science World. Before the break, you were telling us about something, and I missed the middle word, invisible something technology. And I just was hoping that you could expand a little bit on that.
Yes, it's called Invincible
Invincible. There we go.
Defense Technology. And the modern version was developed by physicist John Hagelin, who is founder and president of the Maharishi University of Business, which is in the Midwest, I think Illinois. Now, what this did was bring ancient teachings of the Maharishi Yoga, who you may know of through their association with the Beatles, and Maharishi brought this from an event that happened perhaps 1,500 years ago in Tibet. And at that time, a very, very large group of adepts, probably the largest grouping of adepts that had ever gotten together on the planet, were gathered together, and they shifted the global consciousness at that time. Now, bringing this forward, John Hagelin, being a physicist, realized that the point where physics and mysticism or the psychic sciences come to meet is right there in that area where we realize that everything is created of energy, and that the quantum field, if we're conscious of it, is a living field. And so what John had developed was that, and found, was that a relatively small proportion of trained meditators could remove the causes of conflict at a level that was far below anything else. It's because of what he calls natural law. And in removing the pressures, the cultural pressures and political pressures, you can essentially ameliorate the whole business of weapons of mass destruction. And they have proven that crime rates would dramatically drop, and in many instances when they had a trained group of meditators. Now in Ecuador, they're already training troops to become more conscious and training them as meditators to do this very thing in that country. Other countries are following suit.
Yes, they've done a lot of with very small groups. I think there was like 3,000 or 7,000 groups of meditators that had done this. Do you think that we could take the same thing? Because and maybe you don't agree that we are at a very critical point as far as the delicate ecology of the world. There's so many people out there that are kind of saying that there's global warming isn't a problem, or climate change, whatever the word that you want to use. Do you think that we could use this same concept of gathering people together in meditation for healing the ecology?
Absolutely, and bless you for that revelation, because this is the kind of message I'm trying to put out. These psychic technologies, many of them, such as remote viewing, for example, are only the tip of the iceberg. We can use these technologies, and if we learn to form coherent groups, we can do all kinds of things, from removing, from conflict resolution in the world, to think of a new level of what we like to call organic or natural foods. Think of foods that are their energy and their vitality levels and their nutritional values are significantly and statistically upped by conscious meditators working together with fish farms and orchards and any food production facility. It's a whole new level.
So let's talk about corporations for a second. Lots of people have this idea, especially when you have the Monsantos of the world, that there are these evil entities and we're going to have to move away from them. What role do you see corporations playing in our future science world?
Oh, the corporations are going to lead the world, and again, the whole Tesla scenario gives a perfect example of how changes can be made very rapidly, despite the fear of change, despite the knee-jerk reactions of naysayers who would rather criticize than just accept something new. And and now, because of what Elon Musk has done with Tesla, now the big auto companies, BMW and I believe General Motors and Ford, are coming out with their own electric cars to compete. No one, I think, would have predicted this could happen only 2 years ago.
So part of me is hearing that, and like I said, I'm a huge fan of Elon Musk, but is hearing this, and so far I would say that there's a lot of track record of large multinationals not really caring about some of the issues that are really facing us as far as, our ecology, our social injustice, all of that, our income disparity, all of those things that are really big contributing factors to lowering the quality of life for a lot of people on this planet. So how can we know, or I don't know, feel okay that they are going to have our best interests in mind and make those, because they do have the infrastructure, they have the opportunity to create change on a large scale, but how do we know that they're going to be making these with our best interest?
Well, one of the things we can do is put out this, what is happening, what we're doing right this moment is changing a certain segment of the global consciousness. And you have to realize when people go to work for any large corporation, they're not thinking that they're going to go and work for the evil empire today. They're probably worried about paying their bills. And so I tell people to put yourself in the other folks' shoes and see about this. The good part of this is that all of us can vote with our wallets, because if a product such as Roundup from Monsanto is not being purchased, the company will change its direction very fast or it won't survive. And so we do have that ability to vote with our wallets. And the more and more people that kind of catch this positive conscious co-creation, this new form of living, and they find that they can get satisfaction and happiness and a bit of peace of mind, these things are addicting. They're addicting in a very good way.
Yes, no, I absolutely agree. We have about 5 minutes before our break, and I want to talk about otherworldly or maybe other dimensional entities such as UFOs and even just some of the spiritual helpers that are here, maybe trying to help us usher us into this new time. How do you think that especially let's first talk about UFOs. Do you feel that they are going to be an important part of our future?
Absolutely. And I tell people, quit beating a dead horse. Do UFOs exist or not? There are thousands and thousands and thousands of eyewitness reports, and you could spend years researching them, but my main conviction is from not necessarily from my own experience, but from meeting two individuals, Robert Dean, who had the highest security clearance. He helped invent the red phone. He was former military. I have sat down with Robert, and he's told me that on numerous occasions he sat down with military brass, government suits, and several different species of ETs. I've talked with aerospace engineers who have worked in the Skunk Works project for Lockheed Martin, and also another man, Charles Hall, who worked in Area 53 and told me about his encounters with the tall whites there.
Yeah, it was interesting. Anytime I would hear people talk about UFOs when I was younger, I would say that's such an uninteresting conversation. Of course they exist. Why are we still worrying about debating this? Do you think that they're here to help us? Do you think for the most part they're kind of out there cheering us on, saying, okay, guys, you can do it?
Well, I'm going to say something a little funny here, but the more and more I've researched this, if we think our politics on this planet is screwed up, the exopolitics, the exopolitical situation of ETs is very complex. Each group have their own agendas. Some of them don't want anything to do with Earth. Some have negative agendas. The government has definitely made deals where certain groups have been able to get samples in exchange for technology. And just to put a little cap on that, I had I have a friend who is an aerospace engineer and a new scientist who worked with zero-point energy, And he told me, he said he did some favors. He was not a classical physicist, but he got some information to certain people, and they told him, he said, if people really knew what was going on, their hair would curl, because certain individuals, probably outside our government, have been traveling to the planets and other places, perhaps out of this solar system, for 20 years, but they don't even use spaceships and drag around all that hardware. They're using something we would call a time gate or a wormhole transmission.
And is that technology connected to what we're talking about, this quantum field?
Absolutely. And these, I think it's an incredible resource. I consider channeling. I have cross-referenced different channelers. I have talked with different groups of ETs, and I have gotten amazing information. For one thing, I asked them at one point, my previous book, Transforming the Global Biosphere, was much more physical, although it did tell of psychic technologies. And I asked them, they said that book, the majority of those things that I wrote about would be implemented in my lifetime. But they said this book will be good for the next 1,000 years. And that really made my jaw drop. And you know, I can just see, you see, in my world, we would have a special psychic branch of the White House to help advise the president, because these sources of information take in all the variables that we don't even know about, and can thus not put in our own computer programs. In the quantum field, everything is there. The ETs, some of these groups are very high. They can even create life. And so their answers to questions are sometimes remarkable.
Well, we are almost up on a break. When we get back, we're going to do a little segment I call Bite-Sized Brilliance, which I think is a perfect opportunity as we talk about aliens to kind of bring it on back home and realize what we can do in our own lives to help usher this new future science world in. So we are talking with Dr. Elliott Maynard here on Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque on OMTimes Radio. We'll be right back.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
The Laying On of Hands Healing Radio Show is about treating the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. Join me, Charles Smith, as I share life-balancing measures such as nutrition and spiritual practices to help you take charge of your own health and wellness every Thursday at 7 p.m. on OMTimes Radio.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
Hi, this is Angela Levesque, host of Entanglement Radio. Join me Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern for inspiring conversations with visionaries in spiritual science and conscious healing. Entanglement Radio, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern. Transcendent talk for the conscious mind.
Feed your soul with waves of consciousness on OMTimes Radio.
All right. right, we are back here on Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque. My guest again is Dr. Elliott Maynard, and he is the author of Brave New Mind, Living in a Future Science World. And we are at the point of the show here for the Bite-Sized Brilliance segment. And this is brought to you by Hestia Health, specializing in mind-body awareness, energy healing, and conscious weight loss. You can find out more at hestiahealth.com, creating calm minds, open hearts, inspired lives. So what we like to do in this program, especially this is a great example, is when we have these really high-level, high-minded conversations, how do we bring it on back to the level of our daily lives? How do we make this ideas practical? Before the break, we were talking about aliens, and you kind of think, so how do we take this information and make it something that I can use? And I think that lots of times in the spiritual community, I think on one aspect, we have people who are very grounded in the physical world, and then we have some people in the spiritual community who are so kind of, I'll use the word woo-woo and up there and kind of groundless. And I think that we need to find a place to bring this together. So when we talk about this idea of the quantum field, what can the individual do in their life to really start to understand and to engage it?
Well, I wanted to just go back a little bit because I didn't answer your question, I think, about psychic cleanliness. This is a simple way for people, when they begin to be so-called psychically or intuitively sensitive, you need to be more and more careful about outside inflows, which can actually serve to trip you up very severely in some cases. Now, there's always the negative trying to, anytime you try to do something new and positive, there will be a number of people who knee-jerk react and even become very irrational, people who you consider to be your friends. Now, some of the easy ways, simple things that we can do, and if we do it, for instance, do a good turn for someone every day, the old Boy Scout motto, leave a place a little nicer than you found it. And the third is try to create win-win situations in business and personal life. And really, with a new paradigm, you can go on and create sometimes win-win-win, so that there are three parties that come out feeling really good about a deal, or win to the X power. Now, if you think of the possibilities with the global mind field, this working with this new wonderful global internet that we have, you realize how much of a precious resource we have in our hands. And I believe that when we as I say, I'm preaching to the choir here, the ones that have the experience begin to establish themselves as you're doing right this minute, the others will fall into line, because this is just a very good part of, I think, a good characteristic of the human condition. The wing nuts will come down or go somewhere else.
One thing that I noticed about all of your suggestions is you didn't say to meditate or to sit there and imagine your heart expanding and connecting to the field. You were talking about more ways that you can just, like being a good person and doing things, and that will kind of ripple out into this field of possibilities. So instead of just focusing on connecting to the field, you're just saying create a more integrity in this field.
Well, I believe what has happened, you mentioned this before, it's fairly, the wavelengths out there, and these people have mentioned that our vibrational construct has speeded up so much that we have achieved what is called the ascension frequency. No longer do we need to sit under a bow tree for 30 years with a begging bowl or live in a cave. Because of those brave people that did this, they made this easier and easier. Now with a higher frequency, this can happen instantly, and I can't prove this to you other than from my own experience, by the courage of my own convictions. But I invite you to try it, and if you try it, you'll begin to see changes in your life that you can't even imagine could be possible.
So one of the things is, I look around, you go to the mall, you eat at a restaurant, and everybody is on their cell phones. And you kind of alluded to this electromagnetic smog that we're in. Would you suggest that people pull back a little from their cell phones, or is a way that we can interact with those types of technologies in a better way?
Well, apparently there are already alternative medical practitioners and medical practitioners who are having to deal with people who are so hooked to what one scientist friend calls the electronic tit that their lives have become really neurotic and abnormal. So there's a balance of all things, and I believe any technology is a God-given gift, but not to the exclusion of interfacing with nature and interfacing with the world around you and keeping your radar, your intuitive senses out, because that's a great survival imperative in these times.
So get off your phone. It's one of the things, especially on the weekend. So much of this job, I have to be on social media and all of that. But on the weekends, I really try to spend large chunks of both Saturday and Sunday not being plugged in. And to me, that it makes such a huge difference, because I don't have that same draw on my own energy field as I would normally. You have one of the keys in your book is called being, subtle energy management. And do we need to become better subtle energy managers?
Absolutely, because in this world where we are among a lot of people who are learning and experiencing these subtle energy powers and energies, we find that people will go to extremes, and in such communities there are also a certain segment of folks who are, I call them energy vampires. They will come and try to take your energy because they haven't learned how to discipline themselves properly, or they've had some kind of abuse history and the abuse excuse. But anyway, this is very important. And again, when we come into this new operating system format, it will begin to form our consciousness, all these different parts. I've given 25 different approaches or keys, master keys, to approaching this, and there's quite an array. There's something for everyone there, I think. And they're very simple, grounded ways. And the other thing that I haven't mentioned, it's very important, that women are needed so much, the feminine energies, to straighten this world out.
And that's an interesting conversation too, that we could probably spend a whole hour on, is that we have, in this, patriarchal society, women have kind of moved towards more of a masculine energy. And it's something I just like to, it's one of my soapbox issues, that it's not, one isn't better or worse than the other, but we should recognize and celebrate our feminine energy. And that doesn't mean that we are less or any of that, but that part of us is, like you said, what we need right now. We need that nurturing. We need that more intuitive, artistic, more abstract, the right brain sort of faculties to really to take over right now, or at least bring us into balance.
Yes, yesterday I was at the coffee shop sitting outside and thinking about this, and I realized that many women have become kind of armored in the sense that they've become, they've been hit on by people who are jerks, and they're tired of it and all of this. But I went by this one lady who was coming in, and she gave me the nicest smile, and I said, if women would just loosen up a little bit and do this, I said, that made my whole day. And I didn't even speak to her. So there's a perfect example of exactly what you just said. And I'm sure there are lots of other ways that ladies could inject that sense that keeps the world together and families together, put it out more instead of being so armored.
And it's a difficult conversation, because we came from a place where, we were second-class citizens, and now I feel like we've kind of lost touch with what makes us uniquely feminine. And you're right, that's exactly what the world needs right now. So we have about 3 minutes left, and I want to give you the opportunity to share with my listeners where they can find your book and anything else you want to leave them with today.
Yes. I think that there are a couple things that we can do that are very grounded and very simple. we've been trained by our teachers, our parents, our whole society is all about being a critic. And critics, I don't like the word critic, because what we need are people that will not knee-jerk react because they're of that fear element to any new idea. If they can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all, or at least learn to be diplomatic and give people the benefit of the doubt. And the other thing is that we need to not just criticize. In other words, don't shoot the mailman because you won't get any more mail and you won't have any more information source. Instead, stop yourself. And the other thing is judgment. And that's the toughest one of all. We're all taught to judge, and we need to check ourselves every time we do it, and that'll start to nibble away and level things out properly.
And I couldn't agree with you more. Where can people find your book, and maybe give out your website?
Amazon.com, the book is there, and our website is on your website, Arcos Cielos, our foundation, which is ARCOSCIELOS.com. And there are a number of interviews, television interviews about the book, both from New York and Los Angeles, on YouTube. If you Google my name, Elliott Maynard, or The Brave New Mind, Living in a Future Science World.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the program today. It was such a delight to speak with you. We are here every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern. If you need to get a hold of me at any time during the week, you can email me at hestiahealth.com. You can find me on Facebook and on Twitter at Hestia Health and on Entanglement Radio. Next week, we have Dr. Anders Nilsson talking about a scientist's approach to transformation. This is Angela Levesque wishing you love and light, and I will see you next week.